maybe not. And welcome back to the show this morning. It's Monday. Come on.
Go or no go.
Exactly. After this whole coronavirus thing is over, it's been a good excuse to keep people away from me I don't want around me anyway. Sorry, can't come over. Yeah. I don't know what excuse I'm going to use next. I think I'm going to open up an excuse line on our website. So please email me your excuses that are usable for people you don't want to really see anyway.
Sorry, I've got to wash my masks out tonight.
Exactly. Anyway, yeah, we're getting to that point. Okay. So just talking about a second ago is that one of the things that could potentially kind of derail the market over the course of the next few weeks in particular is this ongoing debate in Congress about more stimulus or not more stimulus. Now, there was an interesting chart out this morning, and I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, showing what has been making up personal incomes over the course of the last few months. So from February to June, there's been an increase in personal incomes. Okay, so great. Personal incomes have gone up. Now, where did that personal income growth come from? Right. So normally personal income growth comes from wages, right? So you get paid more, and of course, personal incomes go up. What the chart broke down is it showed out of total personal income that is received by a household, including wages and taxes and these type of things, what all impacts that personal income. And it was interesting because everything that is something you generate personally was negative, right? So wages and salaries, income from other sources, those type of things, all down. Not surprising because of the economy. So we've had this big jump in personal income. Where did it come from? Obviously, UI benefits, checks to households, tax rebates, those type of things, right? So that's what's increased this personal income as of late. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is the debate that's now going on in Washington, which is more $1,200 checks to households, more UI benefits, those type of things, right? So we need to keep money flowing into households to keep the economy going. And this is where we're hung up at the moment. Now, over the weekend, President Trump had offered to extend the UI benefits for another week so people could keep getting their additional $600 a month, $600 a week check of additional unemployment benefits. Democrats turned that down. They had productive meetings, quote unquote. You put hashtags, quotes around that, quote marks around that. They had productive meetings over the weekend, even though both sides are claiming they're nowhere near a deal. So the question is really what happens coming out of this? There seems to be a consensus right now to send a round of $1,200 checks to households. So that's encouraging. The other side of this, now hold on, back up for a second, because when I say it's encouraging, we'll talk about the other side of this in a second. Okay, so we'll get there. So don't get too far ahead of me. The other side, of course, is now the debate over the unemployment benefits. The contention over these UI benefits is that it's incenting people not to go look for work because they're making more money being unemployed than they were getting paid at work. And this is particularly for the case for the majority of the jobs that were lost going into this were in lower wage paying jobs, such as, retail work, restaurant work, bar work, that type of thing, where their wages were not necessarily that high. So when you give them their unemployment benefits plus an additional $2,400 a month, they're living large, right? So this has been a big impact to what we've seen in terms of increases in personal spending. Retail sales have all been much better than expected because of this additional impetus into the economy. Now the debate is whether or not to extend that again. So the Democrats want to right now continue to give people $600 a week through the end of the year, get you through the election. the Republicans want to tailor that back to 70% of income. So that would take roughly that $600 a week or $24 a month and pull that back to about $400 a month. So there's a big differential there, right? So if you extract that much capital from the economy, you're going to have a slower economy going forward. So, and again, in order just to maintain the economy, you have to do what we did previously. So, if I give the economy $1 trillion, I'm going to get $1 trillion bump to activity theoretically. So if I only do 500 billion the next time around, I'm going to have a reduction in economic growth. If I do another trillion, I only have the same amount of growth. So my growth becomes zero over the course of the next quarter. So again, because we measure growth on a quarter-over-quarter basis or a year-over-year basis, right? So in order to keep economic growth going, and this is a key point here, is I've got to keep increasing the amounts of money I'm injecting into the economy. So I wrote about this on Friday. I actually have an article on the website. It's talking about universal basic income because that's what we're talking about here, right? So we are supplying income to households. It's a universal basic income. Everybody is getting it. And when they get it, they spend it. Now, here's the thing. So if we look at this on a year, we measure GDP growth on a year-over-year basis, right? So what is our GDP this year versus last year? It was up 2%. That's how we measure it, right? So we had 2% growth year over year. So the problem with UBI is that once I inject $1 trillion into the economy, I've got to do more the next time to keep getting economic growth, because if I don't, my economic growth remains the same on a year-over-year basis. Now, we won't even talk about the problems with increasing debt. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the point here, and this is the challenge now for Congress, and it was interesting because I had a congressman reach out to me over the course of the weekend asking me to potentially get on a panel to talk about sound money. And this is an interesting point because it's great conversation, but actually doing something about it is entirely a different story, because nobody really wants to do anything about creating sound money or reducing the debt because of the pain that's involved to do it. I mean, just like we're talking about now with this additional household distributions, right? Another $1 trillion of government debt, another $1 trillion increase to the deficit because we have a decline in revenues now, which means that everything that we're doing is coming out of debt and leading to a bigger deficit. But what's the choice, right? This is the belief that we all have. What's the choice? If we don't supply the money to households, oh my goodness, we're going to have a big recession. People are going to lose their houses. People are going to, they're going to go bankrupt. They're going to lose their debt. They'll default on their debt. Lots of negative consequences, right? If we don't do this, if we don't supply the income, if we don't supply the additional money, we're going to have economic fallout. That's absolutely true. But that's the consequence. If you want to start resolving the debt issues, you've got to allow the system to function. One of the mistakes that we made back in 2008 is that we started these programs called HAMP, HARP, all these other things, which was designed to keep people in their homes so that they wouldn't lose their home, right? We don't want people to lose their homes. That's a terrible thing. But here was the problem. We kept people in homes in areas where there was no work. We locked them into their homes. So this was particularly the case in cities like Detroit and others where there was a lot of economic devastation because of the fallout. So now we've locked people in their houses and now they're immobile. They can't move from that house to somewhere where there's work to where they could get reestablished. So instead of allowing them to default on their mortgage, get out of the house, and move somewhere and rent an apartment and go back to work and start over, we locked them in their homes and we exacerbated that problem long term. So this is the problem, is that there's not a free lunch in any of this. And we'll talk about some of the debt issues when we come back, but there's not a free lunch. At some point, you've got to be willing to say, and look, this is a horrible thing to say, and don't get me wrong, I don't wish ill on anyone, but we all make choices, right? We make choices about how much debt we carry. We make choices about what we engage in. We have personal responsibility in these issues. And sometimes the best opportunity for someone is to allow the system to work, to file for bankruptcy. Nobody cares about bankruptcy anymore. You file for bankruptcy. It used to be a terrible thing back in the day. You couldn't get a loan for 10 years if you had filed for bankruptcy, right? Nobody cares anymore. After the financial crisis, like, oh, you filed bankruptcy? Yeah, no big deal. We understand the financial crisis. Here's more credit. Nobody cares anymore. But what the bankruptcy system and the foreclosure system and those things allow for is to alleviate the debt and the burden on someone so they have the ability and the opportunity to start over. And guess what? Investors, these are the people, we're not really protecting the little people, right? This whole game that we're doing is not about helping the little guy. This is about protecting Wall Street and making sure the investors, the pension funds, the hedge funds, all the people that made billions of dollars roping people into houses they couldn't afford, that they don't lose money. So the question is really, who are we trying to help out? Be right back.
Real Investment Show podcasts are now available on iTunes. Listen anyplace, anytime at iTunes.com.